Lag BaOmer Sameach, everyone. Here we are in Eretz Yisrael. It's a very different type of Lag BaOmer this year. No matter where you're watching, I'm sure it's the same, that the traditional bonfires everywhere are not happening. And though there was in Meron, for people who watch it, maybe you could watch it archived. Wonderful music and dancing, everything, but a very small group of people, everyone masked, where in previous years up to 500,000 people in the 24-hour period of Lag BaOmer go to Meron. So it's a very different Lag BaOmer this year, but the energy is there, and we are still celebrating. I have to mention, most of you know this, that it's exactly a year since the Moshav fire. It happened on Lag BaOmer. The night of Lag BaOmer, we had a beautiful event here at our house. And actually it was so hot, we did it inside with the air conditioning. It was so hot. The next day at 2 o'clock is when the Moshav was engulfed by fire, like the biggest bonfire you could imagine. Very mysterious up to today, enigmatic, ironic, paradoxical. And I just want to actually thank all the people all over the world who have been so supportive and feel your prayers all the time. It's a year later, and the cup is it half empty or half full? As you know, most people lost everything, and for them it's less than half full. But we are hoping that in 4 months there will be approximately 25 caravillas here, and people will be able to come back and start rebuilding. Bezrat Hashem. Right now we're approximately 12 family units on the Moshav, and there's still a lot of reminders of the fire. It's not easy, but for those people who are living here, we count our blessings. And Bezrat Hashem, we will see better days. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai hid in a cave for 13 years. 13 years without seeing family, students, except his son who was with him. So we take great hope in that, and also that the coronavirus will pass, and everyone who needs a refuah shlema will have one. And Bezrat Hashem, the whole world, I want to get back to normal, because I don't think anyone wants to get back to normal. Like, it's been such an awesome few months. We need something new. We need redemption. We need Mashiach. We need new consciousness, everyone. And Bezrat Hashem, that will happen. So we're just going to give over a few ideas about Lag BaOmer, and reminding everyone, Wednesday night, we are going to continue with portraits of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Everything we can't finish today, we could just scratch the surface. But I just want to start with the idea of what is Lag BaOmer? Why are we celebrating? The main celebration is really the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which in itself is paradoxical, because usually on a yurtzeit, it's not a time of great rejoicing. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, literally on his deathbed, told his students that they should commemorate this day in great joy. It would be like a hilula, like a wedding celebration, as his soul was reuniting with Hashem in the upper worlds. And in fact, he died saying the word chaim, life. So this is also actually everlasting life. Those were the last words he said from the 133rd Psalm, the 3rd verse, if anyone wants to look it up. But he was celebrating that his death was only his body. His neshama certainly wasn't dying, and his teachings weren't dying. They were ad olam. To this day, as we are celebrating what's called the inner dimensions of the Torah. Just like Shavuos is called the holiday of the giving of the Torah, the written Torah. Lag BaOmer has become known as the holiday of the inner dimensions of the Torah. We're going to come back to Rabbi Shimon in a minute, but the other reason for commemorating Lag BaOmer is in the Gemara, it just simply says that between Pesach and Shavuos, 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died. It doesn't give a date, but according to tradition, we'll see there's actually many traditions, I'm doing this very in short, is that on the 33rd day of the Omer, the students stopped dying. Other versions are that everyone had this idea that there were 33 days or 32 that the students died, but they calculated differently. Some calculated from Rosh Chodesh Iyar to 3 days before Shavuos. That's the Ramah. The Shulchan Aruch says it was the first 34 days. The Maharsha says 33 is a 2/3 supermajority of the 50 days. And another version is that they died for 33 days, except for 17 days. And what are those 17 days? 7 days of Pesach, 7 days of Shabbases, 7 Shabbases, and 3 Rosh Chodeshes. 7 plus 7 plus 3 is 17. So they died for 33 days. But the main thing is, the celebration is that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, not that he just passed away, but his teachings will live forever. So I just want to pose a quick question that many people ask is, why do the first 33 days, at least after Pesach, have rituals of mourning? No weddings, no hair cutting, no live music. These are rituals of mourning. And so the answer is because of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva who passed away during this time from what they call Azkara, or the croup. That's what they think it is. Not a pleasant disease. It was like a plague. But when we compare to all the other terrible things that happened in Jewish history, why so much mourning for the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva? So to answer in short, we have to understand that Rabbi Akiva, 50 years after the destruction of the temple, when Rabbi Akiva was much younger, in 70 CE, approximately, 50 years later, 50 to 60 years later, there was the Bar Kokhba rebellion. And Rabbi Akiva threw his weight behind the rebellion and even declared that he's the Mashiach. So everyone asks, what was Rabbi Akiva thinking? Rabbi Akiva we'll discuss more on Wednesday, was one of the greatest figures in Jewish history because he is the link between the transmission of the oral Torah and the mystical Torah is all dependent on Rebbi Akiva. So what did he see that he called Bar Chachma the Mashiach? So again, in short, what happened is there was a rebellion, and Bar Chachma succeeded. He kicked the Romans, the greatest army in the world, the greatest empire in the world. He kicked them out of Israel, and we had sovereignty again. We had independence. And according to many, he was preparing to build a third temple. And then Bar Chachma kind of went off, and he lost the support of Rabbi Akiva and all of the sages. And he was defeated, and a terrible slaughter in Beitar. And that was the end of Jewish sovereignty until the last 100 years when we started coming back to Israel, 125 years. We always talk about 2,000 years in exile. Well, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about. So really the mourning is that after the Bar Chachma rebellion, that was it for Jewish sovereignty in Eretz Israel. There were still Jews here, but so weakened, and the Romans were so in charge. And then later Islam took over, and then the Crusades. And since we mentioned the Crusades, is that in the Torah, in the Talmud, in the Midrash, there's no mention of mourning during this period. So where did it come from? So almost everyone agrees now that the Crusades, the first and second Crusades, happened during the month of Iyar mostly. And terrible, shocking slaughters and massacres going on in both the first and second Crusades. And so then they looked back and they connected it to this loss of sovereignty. And there wasn't mourning practices until then, but they kind of put the two together. But still we have the question, what did Rebbi Akiva see here? What was he trying to accomplish? So what we have to understand is there was a deep love-hate relationship going on between Rome and Israel. This is the same energy between Yaakov and Esav. We're going to discuss this more on Wednesday night for those who are interested to understand the soul history of Rabbi Akiva. Goes back to Yaakov and Esav. And Yaakov and Esav had a love-hate relationship, and it was transferred to Rome and Israel. Many, many high upper-class Romans converted to Judaism. The Gemara is full of discussions between the sages and the aristocratic segment of Rome. Fascinating debates, and yet it was Rome that conquers Israel. And Rabbi Akiva himself, after his first wife died, remarried a woman from the upper echelons of Rome who converted, and he married her. That's a whole story. Hopefully we'll get to it on Wednesday. Whole amazing story. So there's this love-hate relationship. Here's Rabbi Akiva fighting Rome to the death, really. He was tortured to death by the Romans. And yet he marries a convert from Rome. So what Rabbi Akiva was seeing was 1/10 of the Roman Empire at that time was Jewish. Rome and Alexandria were 10% Jewish. And like in countries all over the world, Jews tend to rise to the top. It wasn't just 10%. They were very influential. And the whole Roman Empire had Jews everywhere. And seeing how many Romans were converting and the great interest that they had. And at that time, there was a tremendous fervor, messianic fervor. That's where Christianity comes from. Christianity also was born. There was a messianic fervor that was happening at that time. And Rebbi Akiva felt that if Bar Chachma could be successful and drive the Romans out of Israel, it would have a domino effect. It would have such an effect on the whole Roman Empire that Jews in other places would revolt, other people would revolt, and they would throw the Romans out. But something deeper is Rebbi Akiva saw that Rome, the whole Roman Empire, which was pagan at the time, idol worshippers, but they were ripe for a spiritual revolution. And what actually happened? This is all happening around 130 CE. 200 years later, the entire Roman Empire accepted Christianity. And from that comes the Christian church. Until then, all Christians were Jewish. Until Rome, the emperor, converted, and he converted the entire Roman Empire. And then the Catholic Church grew by leaps and bounds. So Rebbi Akiva saw this. He saw that they were ripe for a spiritual revolution. He was hoping it would be Judaism. He was hoping it would be the idea of one God and rebuilding the third temple. So Rebbi Akiva had what we'll call unclear prophecy. So why the mourning? Why the mourning? Is because this dream ended for 2,000 years. So when the Crusades happened, there was an awareness, a seeing into the past, a connection between what was happening between Pesach and Shavuos during the Crusades and what actually happened the first time. And I'll mention that even though the Gemara says they died in a plague, Rav Sharira Gaon, one of the last of the Gaonim in Babylonia, he said they died during religious persecution. In other words, he hints that the 24,000 students of Rebbi Akiva, they were like the mainstay of the rebellion. Because if Rebbi Akiva threw his weight behind the rebellion, well, obviously his students would follow him. And so the Gemara says they died by croup. And even more than that, they say, why did they die? They didn't have enough honor, kavod, one for the other. Why was the second temple destroyed? Sinat chinam, for baseless hatred. So it doesn't say that the students hated each other, but they didn't have sufficient love and honor for each other. Even though it's not clear in the Talmud when Rebbi Akiva made this statement, that v'ahavta recha kamocha, to love your neighbor as yourself, zeh klal gadol b'Torah. This is the major principle of the Torah. But there's every reason to believe that he said it after they died, because then he saw, without sufficient love, after the first temple is destroyed by baseless hatred, and then all of his students died because they didn't have enough honor one for the other, and then the whole Bar Chachma rebellion falls apart. So then he says, "V'ahavta l'recha kamocha." Love your neighbor is the general principle of the Torah. So that's what the mourning period is about. But you can't mourn forever. Even someone, chas v'sholom, loses a parent or a spouse or a child, God forbid. You never forget, but the mourning period is limited. So Lag BaOmer, the mourning ends. So now let's go to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And let's look at the major custom of this day, which is the bonfire. The question is, why the bonfire? So in the book of Devarim, the Torah is called Eish Dat, a fiery knowledge. So it's brought down that the light of Torah is expressed in the bonfire, and especially the inner dimensions of the Torah. The inner fire of the Torah, the soul of the Torah, the Kabbalah, the mystical tradition. And we see this in many, many ways, but what I want to give over, so why was Rabbi Akiva so important? Because after his 24,000 students died, he took upon himself 5 students. That's it. He had 5 students. But those 5 students were the crucial link to carrying on the oral tradition and the mystical tradition. I'll only talk about 2 of them right now. Is Rebbi Meir, whose yurtzeit was on Pesach Sheni, and any Mishnah that no name is mentioned is Rebbi Meir. Stam Mishnah, Rebbi Meir. But where did he get it from? From Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva gave over the organized oral tradition. Who was Rebbi Meir's student? Was Yehuda Nasi, the one who actually compiled the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is the basis of the Talmud. So we see that Rabbi Akiva is the major link. And the other student is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And he also received the oral tradition, of course, but he received the mystical tradition. He received the mystical tradition. So the story is that when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, after 12 years in the cave, we're skipping a lot of the story, hopefully we'll get back to it on Wednesday, is he was in the cave for 12 years with his son, and he hears a voice from heaven. He had a visitation from Eliyahu Navi, who says, who is going to tell Rabbi Shimon he can leave the cave now that the decree is canceled? There's a new Caesar. So Rabbi Shimon comes out, and after 12 years, this is where a lot of the tradition of the Zohar is formulated, is in the cave. So he comes out, and he sees people working the fields, and he's like, how can people be involved in the physical world? Isn't everyone learning Torah day and night like he was? And it says that everywhere he looked, he burned everything up. He was so on fire, he burned everything up. There's a similar story of the 80 students of Reb Hillel HaZaken, Hillel the elder, where the least of the students was Yochanan ben Zakkai, and the greatest was Yonatan ben Uziel. And so it mentions all the amazing things that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai could do. And then it's, if that's the least of them, what level was the greatest on Yonatan ben Uziel? So it says that when he would be sitting and learning Torah, if a bird would fly over his head, it would be instantly burned up. In other words, the Eish Dat, the fiery Torah. And so a voice comes from heaven and says, I didn't send you out here to burn up my world. Go back to the cave. So Rabbi Shimon and his son went back for a whole other year. And this time when he came out, he had learned to subdue his fire, but to focus it. And it says that when he died on his deathbed, when he told people to celebrate on this day, it says a great light filled the room, a great light. So we see that the bonfire represents in Rabbi Shimon's life that this fire of Torah, this devotion, this inspiration of Torah is best symbolized by the bonfire, and especially at night, because the time that Rabbi Shimon was living through was very difficult. The destruction of the temple, the defeat of the Bar Chachma rebellion, watching his Rebbi Akiva being tortured to death, and here also by burning combs, by fire. So, but it's like night. Exile is like night, and yet the light of Torah will never go out. The light of Torah is eternal, and that's why he dies on the words Chaim ad olam, everlasting life, because the fire of Torah, the light of Torah, and the soul can never be extinguished. In that sense, there is no death. So another beautiful connection to this idea of Lag BaOmer being the panemius of the Torah, the inner dimensions of the Torah. So if you take the word Lag means 33. Lamed is 30, Gimel is 3. Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer. If you switch Lag, it's Gal. And the verse that we'll bring here, Gal means to reveal, to redemption is called Geula, and to open, also to open up means Gal. So the verse is Gal Einai v'abita niflaot mitoratecha. Open my eyes and I will see wonders in your Torah. So that's Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is a time to rededicate ourselves to what's called the inner dimensions of the Torah, to learning the Sod, the secret dimensions, the Kabbalah, and in our day Hasidut. Now, obviously, that goes along with the written Torah, the oral Torah, and following halacha. Kabbalah is not unfortunately, some people have made it as something else other than normative Judaism. Kabbalah is not something else. It is just the deeper aspects. In fact, if you look at the Zohar just follows the Parshas. In a sense, the major components, there are other parts of the Zohar that were embedded in it, but basically, the Zohar goes through the Parshas of the Torah. It is a commentary on the Torah. It uses it then to reveal all kinds of things. So, also, the word Zohar itself means illuminated, light. And it comes from a verse that says, Hamaskilim Yazhiru Kizohar Rakia. The enlightened ones will shine and be illuminated, like they will be illuminated Zohar, like the illuminations of the Rakia, of the heavens. That the enlightened ones will be shown light like the light of the heavens. So the whole Zohar itself is based on light and fire. So this is the essence of Lag BaOmer. And I just want to give over one other thing is the song, probably the most famous song on Lag BaOmer, which is the refrain is Bar Yochai Nimshachta Ashrecha Shemen Sason Me Chaverecha. Bar Yochai, the son of Yochai, is anointed. Nimshachta is anointed. Ashrecha, you should be so joyous. A joyous oil from your friends. So I just want to explain this. Is that the idea of being anointed. So around 800 years ago, there was a famous Kabbalist named Avram Abulafia, and he taught a certain type of meditative Kabbalistic tradition, and where he claimed that people could reach prophecy or at least prophetic experience. So he was very, very controversial in his age. In the last couple decades, people have come to really appreciate that he was also a very important link in the Kabbalistic chain. The reason I'm mentioning him is that when he would describe his experiences in meditation, where he felt he was reaching prophetic levels, he would describe it as feeling being anointed with oil from heaven. Now we know that Mashiach, the word Mashiach, Messiah, literally means to be anointed. Mashiach means to be anointed. And the tabernacle in the desert, before it could be used, had to be anointed with oil. The Kohen Gadol had to be anointed with oil. And a king had to be anointed with oil. So Avram Abulafi was explaining that deep levels of meditation can bring you to the level of holiness like a Kohen Gadol, like being in the Mishkan, like being a Melech. So that's what's hinted to here. Bar Yochai Nimshachta, and then Ashrecha, like what a joy. Now what's the connection with joy? Because it says in the Gemara, there is no prophecy if one is not in a state of joy. That being depressed or sad or not in a real state of joy cannot lead to prophecy. So that's the second part. So Ashrecha, Shemen Sason, a joyous oil from your friends. And let me just explain this at the end. What do you mean Chavirecha, from your friends? So it says in Pirkei Avot, more than I've learned from my contemporaries, I've learned from my students. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai gathered around him a very small group, but they were called the Chevraya, from the word Chavirim. Now it was clear that Rabbi Shimon was the Rebbi, but he created a feeling amongst themselves of total unity and brotherhood. And they were called the Chevraya. Many of us had the privilege of being part of Reb Shlomo's Chevra. That's what we used to call it. We still call it the Chevra, a group of friends. So this is a very, very special relationship that Reb Shlomo helped create for us. This idea of Chavirut. It was clear that Rabbi Shlomo was the Rebbe, but he made it that he was totally accessible. He was like with us. So I'll use this as a way to say goodbye to all our friends who are watching and who will watch, and end with a blessing. One, as we started for the Moshav, that we can rebuild and we can recapture the energy that made this place so central to so many people over the years. But even more than that, like in the coronavirus, we don't want to go just back to where things were. It's really time for an Or Chadash. It's time for a new light, a new consciousness in us as individuals, in Am Yisrael, and in the world. We're living through unprecedented times, and we want something new. And that is really represented by Lag BaOmer, because Mashiach, the anointed one, will come with a whole deeper explanation of everything, of the Torah, what all of history was about, and how to access godliness at all times in every place. So Lag BaOmer Sameach to everyone.